PayPal, and I didn't realize how low credit card penetration is here compared to the UK. I got my first credit card so many decades away that I'm embarrassed to even mention how long ago that was. But I now have, I don't know, 4 or 5 credit cards I use differently. Of course, I have PayPal as well, and I don't think about paying any other way than by credit card. And but here, credit card penetration, I hear, and debit card penetration is quite low, and yet it's so important to actually have frictionless payments. I did a website audit for a client in the UK, and I actually looked at their booking funnel. The booking funnel is the first page when a customer clicks a button to book, and then they have to put in their passenger details and choose a room maybe, and then finally they get to that payment page. And at each page through this booking funnel, my client was losing customers, and one of the pages where you're most likely to lose customers in your booking funnel is actually the payments page, when people think, you know what, it's too complicated to pay, I'm going to get on the phone. So frictionless future for payments is really, really important. That's what makes online swing. In the UK now, we have 2-factor authentication. I guess we'll touch on that because we'll be talking about fraud. So on some websites, I'll put in my credit card number, and then I'll get a text onto my mobile phone with a 6-digit number to put into the credit card payment system to actually get that online payment to go through. 2-factor authentication. Other occasions, I'll be booking on, say, an airline website, and if I'm using my American Express, there'll be another page coming up to ask me to verify with my PIN number that I can actually make the payment. And all those little extra things to do are excuses for an online customer to give up and go elsewhere. So let's talk about strategies for frictionless payments, and maybe I can ask the panel to introduce themselves and give some thoughts. So, after you.
Hi, am I audible?
Yep, I think it's working.
Hi, morning. My name is, good afternoon. My name is Siddharth Dhamija. I head the enterprise business for PayPal India.
Yeah, hi. My name is Rajiv Narayanan. I lead strategy, innovation, technology and partnerships for Ingenico e-Payments India.
Hi folks, my name is Tarun Malhotra. I take care of the enterprise side of Razorpay, and the idea is to meet the B2B clients and help them to help them inflow payments a little better.
Hi, my name is Divakar Kaushik, and I was heading product for GoPay, which is part of Gojek, and which is the largest digital wallet in Indonesia. Currently, I am operating partners at Go Ventures, investing in companies in tech in India and Southeast Asia.
Okay, thank you. And Rajiv, just coming to you for a minute, Ingenico e-Payments, you said what you do there. Can you tell us a bit about what Ingenico e-Payments does? PayPal's a household name. We don't need to ask you about that.
So Ingenico, I think, at least in India, most people would recognize it with the terminal where you swipe your card. We are a terminals major globally, from whether it comes to manufacturing, distribution, all of that. And we are also very large when it comes to e-payments, and when we say e-payments, it means electronic ways to pay, which would mean whether it is automated clearing houses, whether it's making payments through cards, alternative payment methods across different countries. So we are present in about 170 plus countries, and we do end-to-end payments.
Okay, thank you for that. And maybe Divakar, maybe I'll start with you, and perhaps because you've been very active in payments with Gojek, I think, and now Go Venture, and perhaps you can tell me about some of the challenges that you're coming across in getting frictionless payments to actually work in India.
Yeah. So in most countries like India, Indonesia are very similar in the kind of demographics, in kind of penetration of credit cards, debit cards, and digital payments and wallets have come up as a way for a large chunk of unbanked people to get onto organized banking, I would say. So at GoPay, there are 4 major challenges that we have been trying to solve in last 3 to 4 years. We have been successful in a lot of them, but there's a long way for all of us to go. Any digital payment, in our opinion, needs to solve 4 problems. The first one is convenience. It should be extremely convenient because everybody is so used to cash in these economies that it's very difficult to move them from cash to anything else. The second one is ubiquity. To be able to say ourselves as a cash replacer, you have to be ubiquitous. Very similar to what PayPal or Ingenico does. Wherever you go, you find out, you hear that name and you can use it. And the third one is benefits. So for people to move from the current methods to this, they need to have some initial benefits, some monetary, some non-monetary, some social. So that's the third problem. And the fourth biggest problem that we have been trying to solve is build trust, which would come by, and that's where technology helps a lot. So people need to feel that if they move to this method of payment, nothing would go wrong, the way nothing goes wrong with cash. So those are the 4 biggest challenges that most people in these countries face and need to be solved, especially a lot of young people, young demographics who are coming into spending and experiencing digital payments as the first method of payments when they start to earn.
Okay, and Sid, when we were talking before the start of this session, you were telling me some figures about card penetration. Just remind me what they were.
Yeah, so what I was telling you was that, okay. So in terms of the credit card penetration, what I was telling you, while the number says at around 45 million cards in totality from a credit perspective, but if you look at the unique users, because typically every person will have at least 2 credit cards. So the gap is so huge. You have 20 million credit card unique users versus roughly around 200 million unique debit card active users. Now, yes, the number from the Government of India is a staggering some 800 million, but we need to be mindful that majority of those are on the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, which might not have been active till now, but with the digitalization of efforts that the government is putting in right now, I'm sure even those numbers on the debit card usage side will go up significantly higher, just because of the push that the government is doing towards digital transactions.
Okay, fine. And so, Tarun, it sounds as though cash is still king here in India to a great extent. Is that a big issue? I'll tell you why I ask, because I think it's in Holland, in the Netherlands, where there is a system called Gyro being used, where an online goods provider, could be travel, say an online travel provider, will actually issue the buyer with a slip of paper, and then you can walk into the bank with cash if you want, and actually make that Gyro payment to the product provider. Would something like that work in India, or is that just not on? Because of course it's very different geography. Netherlands is quite small in comparison.
Yeah, so I think the way cash was being taken away, and a lot of push from the government side also at the time of demonetization, that the government wanted less and less people to have cash in their wallets and go more about debit cards and credit cards and all. I personally feel getting something like this where a piece of paper is required to do a transaction, I think it's better that the people start focusing around how the other modes like UPI and other modes can be used more proactively, because frankly telling you, I think as Sid also mentioned correctly, there are a lot of people who are on digital modes, but they are not using it very frankly, because it is, I personally feel it is more about education, right? If we've seen a drastic change from cash not being used frequently to today, using online, we still have a lot of scope to handle and help. But I personally feel that people should, rather than looking at a new mode, there are a lot of things available in India right now. Let's try use them before we get into one more new mode and see how this will happen.
Okay, Rajiv, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, you talked about Gyro.
Yes.
India is working on the Gyro. In fact, you would have all heard about BBPS, right? And that kind of came inspired from the Gyro concept.
Yep.
And today it's about making it possible for people to make payments for recurring kind of payments, for various things. Can be your insurance premiums, can be investments, can be school fees, to be made from any terminal, any point out there. and it's actually to promote, you know, as much of digital or last mile cash to electronic as possible. So I think that's a good initiative, but for that to be true for invoice payments, right, is some way to go. But I think the government has taken direction there. But today there are a lot of alternative solutions, right, that exist, right. For example, in travel, especially when you're looking at B2B payments, we are seeing a lot of use cases where we can use link payments or link based payments, where you're basically embedding a link into your payment link into your invoice, and you can basically tap and pay. And from a coverage perspective, it no longer just needs to be your corporate card or your credit card. It can be any of the, you know, accepted digital payment methods. So there's a lot of digital drive that is possible when we are able to digitize invoices and also digitize payments along with that. So you need not always pay on a website or on a channel. So you have to start looking at scenarios where the customer is present, customer is not present, instead of card present and card not present. Yeah.
Okay, and Sid, I'm just wondering whether we care or not, because the 20 million or so people I think you mentioned who do have credit cards, they're clearly the more affluent traveling generation. Are they the only people we need to care about, or do we need to actually say, no, we need to include everyone in and give them all the ability to pay?
No, I think it's not about just including the credit card holders to ensure that they travel. I think that's a wrong thing for us to do, and yes, very thankful to the Government of India for their digitalization efforts that they're trying to do. It's not just demonetization. In fact, I jokingly told someone that the FASTag ruling that came out, that every car needs to have this tag called as FASTag in order for you to process through the toll gates. This is nothing, in my personal opinion, a demonetization phase 2, because imagine what is the government trying to do. The government is trying to make sure that every transaction that you're trying to do has to be on a digital mode. Now, to answer your point, that is the credit card user only user for a travel segment? No, it is not. You know, when I talk to some of the leading, some of the CFOs of the leading travel companies in India, and by the way, PayPal is live with close to 95%. When it comes to domestic payment processing, we're close to 95% live with all our merchants, like Make My Trip, Yatra. There's just one OTA which I don't want to name, but that also should be live with us pretty soon. Now, the trends that they are seeing today is that while UPI has been launched, and it's a very, very successful mode of payment, especially, till around a year back, it was only successful for the low value transactions. But now with the e-mandates coming on UPI, the name UPI itself getting penetrated very well because of, again, initiatives by Government of India. The shift is happening on UPI as well as the alternate modes of payment. So today, if you look at some of the leading travel portals, naming, not naming any one of them in that order, but close to 3 out of 6 offer lending on their platforms. Now, this is non-credit card lending. This is lending which is either offered by one of them is actually an NBFC himself, and the other two have tied up with NBFCs to offer lending products on their platform. If you look at trends, how the numbers are changing, yes, there is enough in the market from a sheer demographic perspective. See, we have a population of 1.3 billion, and will the credit card number rise in the days to come? The answer is a very simple yes, it will rise. But remember the casual chat that you and me were having before this. I told you Indians were credit averse till around 3-4 years back. When we were growing up, our parents, I can't talk about Tarun, he's too young compared to me, but at least my parents taught me the first thing, that don't take credit. The first thing that you take as credit in your life was a housing loan. Unlike in US or in some of the emerged markets like Europe, Australia and all, where people just max out their credit card limits to the last money. Is that happening now in India? I think the trends have started. The so-called millennials have started using more and more credit products, and hence it's natural for not just the credit card market to grow, but also lending in parallel to grow.
Okay, I mean, certainly in the UK, we've never had such high levels of personal debt as we have at the moment, and a lot of that will be funded by credit cards, as you say. So Diwakar, what do you think about this subject?
I think especially in the travel segment, as you said, that if we just map it with the 20 million credit card holder, we would be limiting the view of what it can actually do, the whole digital economy as well as travel. So in India has a peculiar nature of travel as well. Outside these flight travel, a large chunk of the country goes around to work in the metros or the large areas. And like if you look at Delhi or Bombay or Bangalore, in the 150-kilometer radius, a lot of people would come in and go out every day. And the traditional modes of travel would either be train or bus or something very local. Even today, most of that is still cash. And for these people, and these would be easily in excess of 20 million people, and for these people to come onto the digital payments train, UPI, all these payment apps, digital, will start helping. Like he said, FASTag is one great example. Now, more this starts happening, it will certainly start blooming in across the country, because it's payments and travel is not just going to be solved from the consumer side. It is so inefficient on the business side, so you cannot do cash at scale. To run things on scale, you have to move digital. There are issues of reconciliation, there are issues of fraud, there are too many issues to manage on cash. Faster the players jump onto digital methods of wallets or credit cards or any other methods that are being built, we'll see a huge chunk of these non-affluent people also moving on to digital payment methods, and that is going to be a huge market for payments as well as for travel. That's my sense.
And would anyone like to ask a question at all? Just pop your hand up, we'll get a microphone round to you. A tricky subject. Well, while you're all thinking, perhaps we can touch on fraud, because that's a big aspect of I suppose, payments, and not just for the merchants, not just for people who are travel companies selling, but also, I suppose, it might be one of the blockers that actually stop people paying online because they're worried about losing their, well, if they do have a credit card, worried about their credit card numbers being stolen. And this has happened in the UK. I mean, I just think last September, one of my credit cards, I had about £1,500 worth of transactions that weren't mine, so no problem. The credit card company took care of it, but it's a bit of a bore. People who are new to credit cards and debit cards would be very concerned about that. So, I mean, Tarun, maybe you can talk a bit about the concerns that people, where merchants and consumers might have about fraud, and what maybe could be done about it.
So, talking about fraud, I think sitting in an Indian market, I think it's one of the major areas that you always have to be focused around. And look a lot of things where you can put up a lot of barriers or maybe parameters where you can stop a lot of frauds to happen. Yes, there are a lot of merchants today to think about reducing their frauds on their websites. I typically go and meet a couple of OTMs who are because travel is one segment where you still see a lot of frauds happening. A stolen card can be used, or maybe, there's some repeat transactions happening, because when somebody booking a flight, right, he can fly down maybe after 5 hours, then the thing that you've done is gone. So I personally feel that something what Sid also said, I think a lot of non-credit card portion which is today unutilized have to be the key to reduce all these things. Anyways, a lot of companies are looking at reducing frauds. There are fraud checks at the bank sides, there are fraud checks at the acquirer side, there are reasonable number of fraud checks that a company like us also have, but still, I personally feel something like I think nobody have touched about something called a Bharat QR, which today talks about and today comes out as one of the major mode in the market where obviously a little lesser penetration because people need to be more educated about it, but something like that coming into the market and people adaptable to it, I think the frauds can go down. But indeed, I'm not very sure on what level we can reduce it, but I'm sure there's a lot of things that the consumers are also doing. Personally, if I have to tell you, if I use a credit card today, right, if I'm educated, probably I still see whether the merchant is a PCI DSS or not, which typically a customer doesn't know, right? But I think a lot of trust on online have been built up over the few years. People trust the online merchants, and somewhere they're trying to just do a transaction with a point that maybe my card has not been stolen, but yes, the frauds are still happening. And we really need to do something about it, and I think everybody is doing their job, but it can't be controlled in a day or so, That's how it is.
Okay, and yeah, Sid, yeah.
Let me give a different perspective to what Tarun said. And Tarun gave a great perspective about how tech can solve fraud, and I think that's where Razorpay does an awesome job. But let me give you the mindset change as to how this is happening, and I don't want to get into fraud numbers. I think there's enough data on Google which some say that the fraud losses in just the travel industry will be touching in upwards of around $25 billion in the year 2020. So there's enough to read about that. But where I'm coming from is typically the issue around trust. That is where organizations like PayPal, like us, we are the only ones in the world who offer something called as a buyer protection and also something called as a seller protection. So whilst you transact using PayPal on any of the merchants, all the 5, 6 OTAs or 8 OTAs that we are live in, or whether you transact on the Book My Show or any site that PayPal is today live on, you as a consumer get full protection and the buyer also gets full protection, making sure that there is absolutely zero fraud when a transaction is done via PayPal. Because PayPal essentially, if you look at our pedigree for the last 20 years, of course, we are a listed company, we're a $130 billion organization working from around 196 countries, accepting currencies excess of around 100 worldwide. Our DNA, our core competency worldwide is essentially risk management for our vendors. So, when we manage risk, we not just manage risk for the vendor. We of course have 22 million active merchant base worldwide. We're also very proud to say that we have 305 million active users in the world who do 40 transactions a year, which is, and this is, by the way, being a listed company, everything that we say is all as per the stock exchange rulings. Yeah. So it's not that these are some VC funded stories or anything. But why are we having 305 million subscribers? Because people trust a brand like PayPal. Consumers know that, okay, if you transact via PayPal, you have that mental peace that if anything happens to the merchant, PayPal will back my funding source. PayPal will get the money back to me. Why is the merchant so happy today? From the time we launched our domestic payments, which is around 18, 19 months back, the average trend that we are seeing in the OTA segment is that our share of checkout is moving upwards from barely 1% when we had started in April 2018 to a very healthy 2-digit now. And that's a change that has happened over 18 months. Yes, it has taken times for the consumers to realize, as and when they do the second and the third transaction, that every transaction is secured. And even for the merchants, because merchants are typically used to getting payments processed from organizations like Razorpay, PayU's, BillDesk. It was for the first time that there is a payment processing company that came into the market and changed the way merchants look at payment today, because merchants are also assured, oh, if it is PayPal, I don't need to do anything. So big thing for us, the mind change that has happened on both sides.
So thank you, Sid. We need to be winding up now. So Rajiv, maybe starting with you, we're talking about effective payment strategies are key to travel's frictionless future. So starting with you, Rajiv, and then I'll ask you, Tarun, and then Diwakar, I'll ask you. I think, Sid, you just did your fair share there. So starting with you, Rajiv, what's the number one thing, maybe the number 1 and 2 things that need to be done to actually try and make payments part of a frictionless future for travel?
So 2 or 3 things. One thing is we need to focus on customer experience. And by customer experience, we have to focus not just on the experience of the consumer, but also that of the businesses that are connecting travel for the consumers. The second aspect of it is what I would say is there's an omni-channel future, which fundamentally means that we have to look at customer present and customer not present scenarios and be able to serve them well with solutions like QR code, contactless, and all of these other kind of things, so that the customer is able to pay where he is, when he is, with any and every kind of coverage. So it's not limited to a particular set of instruments, but kind of giving the option value of cash with all the benefits. And that's what we should look at. And then obviously when we look at something like travel, the ecosystem matters, right? So you have the OTAs, you have the airlines, you have the GDS systems, you've got one hospitality property management systems. Today I was listening to a lot of interesting conversations and you were talking about the outbound market being big. So there's cross-border relevance as well, right? So these solutions need to traverse borders. We need to look at payment use cases that really tie things together and make things more efficient. And obviously fraud is a big thing. I think security and trust is the strategic advantage. We all need to focus on making that better.
Thank you. And Tarun, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think a couple of important points have already been touched by, but just give me two, three things that I personally feel, I think customer service is one thing, but what has been covered is more about a customer getting a response or maybe getting a ticket easily booked. I am talking about something when a customer did a transaction and he's afraid whether his money will not come back to him or something like that. I think as an organization, when you talk about helping travel to do a frictionless growth in future, you need to give that kind of a confidence to your customer, also saying that, boss, if there's something going wrong or there's a money that needs to be reverted back to you, don't worry, the money is secured and will come back to you. Another thing on customer service, I think more importantly, if people around here have used Razorpay as a payment gateway and use the way we do it, I think it's more about seamless experience. Once a customer comes and decides to pay something on an OTA, right? What are the kind of hops that he is getting into it? How easy is the entire payment flow for him, right? From the time he decided to pay and from the time he gets the tickets in his hand, how easy is the entire flow be? And that's where Razorpay today comes in and we help people.
And that is frictionless, isn't it?
That's frictionless. Another small example, just to not take much of your time, I went to Bangalore some days back and I saw a company called Yulu, right? Yeah. Which is basically a company which has cycles on the road. And that's what I call frictionless, right? I'm just walking on the road, I saw a cycle, I opened my camera, I scanned the QR, and the lock is opened and I'm on the bike and I'm going out. So, think about a scenario that if you have data and mobile in hand, right? That's what friction is. And when I see even Yulu, for me, he's travel, because travel is not only airlines, right? Travel is everything where the guy comes and uses it.
Thank you.
So I think that's how it is.
Thank you. And Tarun, a few words from you? Sorry, Diwakar, a few words from you, sorry.
One of the things that people see friction is generally in the transactional user experience. Like when I'm doing that particular activity, how much friction I'm getting. But generally, a lot of friction is even before that. The work we have to do is to remove the friction of decision making of using all the digital methods for transactions, which will happen by two things. One, liquidity, and second, trust. Liquidity, India, I think, is extremely lucky to have something like UPI. All other countries would want to have something like UPI where all you have to do is just put in a pin and you are just through. Anything that you are trying to do, it's just so seamless. And the second thing is trust. Trust in terms of, like Sid was suggesting, that people should feel that if anything goes wrong, I am covered.
So they're protected.
So doing the transactions with a safety net. So with more, and that safety net is essentially technology. As people build technology of fraud checks, of using data science to build safety on users, to build sense on what kind of users are safe, what kind of users may be doing wrong things, that technology is the safety net. When that safety net is communicated well to users, that trust is built, and that's something which will build the friction in the mind will go away. And of course, on the transaction level, I think most of the travel companies and payment companies in India are already at par, where the transaction is just smooth. If you look at PayPal or Razorpay or Ingenico in their segments, it's the scope of optimization there is already very limited. But the scope of optimization on breaking the decision before using a cash or a digital thing is still a mountain to climb.
Okay, a fantastic session. Ladies and gentlemen, let's thank Sid, Rajiv, Tarun and Diwakar very much for their expertise. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.